And you are now live on YouTube. Susan Michelle, this mic is all yours.
Hi, this is Susan Michel. I am here in Western Massachusetts. It is great to be here as always. Today in the cold state of Massachusetts, it's in the 60s, so definitely spring is in the air. And I am the author of Surrender to Joy From Suicide to Serenity. I teach the transformational truth of A Course in Miracles, which we're all here to study, to learn, to embody the knowledge of. And I have my two beautiful soul sisters here with me. Myrna Skoller is the author of Private Lessons with Jesus, which is an amazing complement to A Course in Miracles workbook. How are you, Myrna?
Hey, just great. Just being here is wonderful. And I'm glad to hear that you're experiencing spring weather in Massachusetts. You've had a cold winter, so it's nice to get that feeling. That first scent of spring is nice. So enjoy it.
Yeah, it's been a really cold winter. I hadn't been able to run for a couple months, and today, in the morning, I guess it was in the 30s, I ran and I saw all the old group, all the people that I knew were there on the trail today. So it was a really nice run. And Glorian is in New York. And Glorian is speaking with us also every Friday. I'm so happy about that. How are you, Glorian?
I'm doing great. Also, I'm just loving the warmer weather, and tomorrow it's supposed to be 77 here in NYC. So I am really excited about that and always glad to be here with both of you.
Wow, I didn't know that. So if it's 77 where you are, it's probably the same where I am in Massachusetts. That's really nice. And anyone else in the room, I see some beautiful faces. If you want to share, just let us know. We'd love to hear shares from whoever feels pulled to say something. We're all here teaching and learning the principles of A Course in Miracles together. I will start out with the paragraph of my book, Surrender to Joy, that I wrote in my introduction. I wrote in my introduction, my passion is God. God is love and joy and beauty. He is all that is good in the world. Everything else is our own miscreation. When we are filled with joy, we are connected to God. When we are not joyful, we have lost our connection to all that is real. This is my message. It can be clarified with three simple words: surrender to joy. There is nothing to find. All we need to do is surrender. There is nothing to find in the world because the external world that we experience is nothing more than a reflection of an internal condition. And that's what A Course in Miracles is teaching us over and over. And it's such an important principle to remember. It really enables us to take responsibility for all of the circumstances that we're in. It's either a blessing or a lesson. The blessings we enjoy, a blessing is when we are connected to God, when we're plugged into our God socket, when we're in our right mind. We experience blessing after blessing after blessing. And that is God's will for us. God's will for us is perfect happiness. When there is something going on internally, and many times we're not conscious of the guilt we're carrying. A lot of times the guilt that we're carrying is repressed in our unconscious mind. So what we experience in life is challenging, and when we're experiencing challenging circumstances, those are our lessons. Those are what we're here to learn from. And usually when we're challenged in life, something hidden in our unconscious mind is being revealed to us again, so we can take responsibility for that circumstance and heal this unconscious hidden pain point. So I just think taking responsibility for our lives is so important because A Course in Miracles tells us we are never, ever a victim of circumstances. And it's so important to remember that. You know, we never want to give our power away, right, Myrna?
Yes, I like that. Giving our power away. What does that mean when we say we're giving our power away? We have the ability to be very strong and resilient souls. That's what we're created from. But we don't see that. We don't see that at all. We see ourselves as small and insignificant. And as a result, we give our power away to guilt, to fear, to all those emotions that come under the umbrella of fear, unworthiness, anger, whatever it is that we're feeling that's not connected to the soul is given over to the ego. And that's when we give our power away. Because we have the power that is given to us to stay within the realm of the Almighty, that we're a part of. That's what we are. And I sometimes I listen to these near-death experiences from people, and basically they pretty much say the same thing, that when they're on the planet, on Earth, what are they experiencing? We all have different experiences. We're all, because we are separate. The experience of the soul, the way it was explained, was that just as we have experiences on Earth that differ from one another, so is the experience of the soul. We all are experiencing different aspects of the soul, yet it's all connected at the same time. So while we can experience our individualism, our truth, our own unique features, if you will, of who we are, we still share the experience. We're not disconnected. We're connected to each other. So the experiences that we share are one and the same, and yet at the same time, when I describe what my experience of the soul has been, or if you explain or teach what you had as a meditative experience, can be very different from mine. But yet, when we put it together, it all comes really into the same place, which is beauty, which is love. That's where it all ends up, as what the experience is showing us. Thank you.
Gloria?
Yeah, I really like that, Myrna. And to me, it comes, God is expressing as. So God is spirit, that one spirit that we all share, expressing as the soul, which is an individualized expression. And that's why we all have an individualized curriculum. So, those who meet are to meet because it's the perfect teaching, learning situation as that essence, that soul expressing God in that individual way. That's how it comes to me. And I like what we were talking about giving our power away. And when we recognize that anytime we accept the ego, the false mind, we're giving away our power. And Jesus tells us the power of decision is our last remaining freedom in this world. So to me, that is just so liberating to recognize that there's always another choice that I could make. I'm not a victim of the world I see because I have this power of decision and I'm able to make a different choice about what I seemingly think is there. And it ties in for me to responsibility for, I'm responsible for what I see. Because the reason I'm responsible is because I can make a different choice about it. So if I'm not experiencing love and bliss, I recognize that I'm not using the power of decision because whatever I seemingly see can be interpreted differently if I'm willing to give that to the Holy Spirit, to the Christ mind to reinterpret it for me. So it comes down to O is that willingness to allow whatever we seemingly see to be interpreted for us, because the ego speaks first. So what we are going to see is going to see some form of separation, some projection of guilt and sin merely put out there to keep the ego alive and to keep us separate from what we really are. So when we recognize that's what we're doing, then we can make another choice. And he talks about trials or lessons presented once again that where I made a faulty choice, a new one can be made. And that's what we're constantly doing moment to moment, choosing between the ego or the Christ mind, whatever words we want to use. We're constantly choosing between the two. And our idea is if we recognize through the relinquishment of our judgments that we're projecting out there, then we are in true forgiveness, where we can experience ourselves as we truly are, because it's the projection of guilt and fear that's making us think we're something else. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you both. Very wise words. And as Myrna said, at our core, we are the same. You know, it's like I always use the analogy of the sun, which is just God, which is just unconditional love. And we are all rays coming out of that one core. We might express ourselves a little differently. We all have different personalities. We all have different unique character traits. We have different ways of speaking, different ways of gesturing. But at the core, when you get deep enough into the core of any one of us, at the core, I believe we are all love. We were created, all of the sonship was created in the image of God. So at the core, we have unconditional love within us. And the only reason we're not expressing that love all the time is because there are blocks. There are blocks. There are guilt, dark clouds surrounding that inner core. And what A Course in Miracles is teaching us to do is to identify those blocks. So when the blocks arise, we can own them and release them. So again, at the core, the other analogy I like is God is the ocean, you know, the majestic ocean, this body of unconditional love. And we are all waves coming out of that one ocean. We might, you know, have different patterns to the waves that we are, but inside we all have the essence of love. And we are never, ever a victim of the world that we see. Why? Because we have created the world that we see. You know, how can I be a victim of something that I myself created? And the analogy that many Course in Miracles students and teachers use is the projector and the screen. So if something is happening in our external world that is not bringing joy to our life, I mean, most of the time, what the world teaches us to do is to rearrange things on the screen, rearrange things in our outer world to try to make the inner world better. Well, it doesn't work that way. We can't rearrange things on the screen so we feel better on the inside. What we need to do is we need to go to the projector and correct the projector. Find what it is in our inner world that is out of alignment. Like, why am I creating this negative experience for myself? What is it within me that does not feel worthy of love? That's where the correction needs to take place. That's what it means to take responsibility for your life. I was listening to a podcast with Carol Howe being interviewed, who's an amazing Course in Miracles teacher. And she was talking about this specific example. She gave an example of how when her sons were younger, 4 years old and 6 years old, there was a older boy from next door that kept coming over to Carol Howe's house to play with her young sons. So the older boy was maybe 13 years old. Her sons were 4 years old and 6 years old, and her sons were constantly getting hurt by this older boy just because he was so big. And Carol Howe was upset. She felt protective of her sons. And she started blaming the older boy for hurting her sons. And then she started thinking, is there any part of me that feels like I'm dominating my sons? Like, how can I, like, why is this situation triggering me? And once she took responsibility for the situation and realized there was a part of her that was being played out by what she was seeing, and once she could take responsibility for that part of herself and forgive that part of herself, the older boy, the 14-year-old boy, no longer came into her backyard to play with her young sons. I just thought that was such a brilliant example, because if something is not working in our lives, instead of blaming the circumstances, instead of blaming the other person, to go within and ask the Holy Spirit, okay, what is there for me to learn from this? What is it within me that has not yet been healed? That's such a powerful way to make changes. And that's what A Course in Miracles is teaching us to do. So, thoughts, Myrna?
Yeah, I love what you were saying about Carol Howe, and how she kind of wondered, she started to do some soul searching to figure out, well, maybe the difficulty was within her. In other words, maybe she was doing something that was causing her to feel that she needed to be defensive for her children, and when you do that, we're such creative individuals. When you think about it, we created a world of illusions. So if we're so creative that we can create such an entire world of illusions, think of how powerful we are if we really took that creativity and went into the part of us that understood the spiritual aspect of who we are and what we can create from that. And when we go there, there's so much that comes up that was just that we become aware of, and so much of that creative understanding is lost within the ego's world. So if we keep vigil on the world that really gives us the benefit of purpose, of truth, of happiness, why do we venture away from it? So, and if we question it and see that, then we can really begin to live a life that shows us what our purpose really is. And when you discover the purpose of who you are, I think my purpose in this world is really to forgive. I think that is probably why I experienced difficult situations in my early childhood that created a lot of difficulty in my young adult years. But I understood that I really needed to learn to forgive. Maybe that was what my purpose was. Maybe my purpose is to create the betterment just by things that we do that we're not even aware of. We do so much in the world just by maybe giving somebody a kind word, giving somebody an idea, being empathetic and helping to heal another individual. There's so much that comes to mind with that. And if we stay within the significance of that, then the whole world opens up. And I found that through experience to be so. Right, Gloria?
You know what? I'm gonna interrupt for one
Oh,
moment
yes,
because no,
Karen.
that's okay. Karen. Yeah,
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 Karen has her
Karen has her
hand up.
hands up.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
That's a,
Karen, your mic.
Hi guys, how you
Hi.
Hi,
doing?
Karen. Good.
Hi. I love what you guys are sharing. First I want to start with what Susan was sharing about the sunbeam. I love that analogy of the sunbeam. So about, let's see, 10 years ago, maybe 12, my daughter, my sister, and I went to New York. We went to Brooklyn. My sister had a friend who worked at Brooklyn Tattoo. We decided to get matching tattoos, but we didn't know what to get. So I knew we all knew we wanted the tattoo on the back of our neck. So I said, why don't we get a sun? And the sun, because the sun and the sunbeam represents that we're never separate. We're always one, and that's what the sun and the sunbeam, represents to me. The sunbeam never leaves the sun. The sun is not the sunbeam is nothing without the sun. And so we all got matching tattoos of a sun with the sunbeam on our neck. Beautiful, small little tattoo, nothing big. It's the only tattoo I have. And I love what Glorian shared too about, and I love what Myrna shared about kindness. I think it's so important to be kind, no matter what. Is just that's the answer to everything, is just being kind. But I love what Glorian shared about, trials are but lessons. And going in kind of coinciding with what Susan Michel shared about Carol Howe with what is the lesson here? Everything is a lesson we're here to learn. And with trials are but lessons, it's because we made a faulty choice. And that's why it's coming around again. And that faulty choice is always that choice for the ego. So it's always that reminder, which teacher am I listening to? It's so simple, really, it's just so simple to remember. And being in that right mind, we were talking about I'm in danger nowhere in the world. As long as I'm in my right mind, I can't be in danger anywhere, because I'm thinking, my thinking can't be in danger. It can't be endangered by anything. And that's where I'm at peace. That's where my peace comes from. So I just remember not to listen to that faulty choice, to the ego, and I'm at peace. So I love everything that you guys are sharing. I just wanted to make a little comment, and I'm just going to listen from now on. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. No, feel free to share whenever, Karen. I love what you say. Glorian.
yeah, I love that. And what Karen said there about kindness, I mean, to me, that's it. I mean, if you're listening to Holy Spirit to direct and guide you, like for me, I'll ask, what is the loving thing to do? The loving thing to do is always to be kind and to meet every call for love with love. And we can only really do that if we've already made that decision to align our mind with the Christ. Otherwise, the ego is not doing that. So we have to laugh at all this you do. I like what you started out with, Susan, about, being created in the image and the likeness of God. And the image and likeness of God is spirit, which is that infinite, invisible I am presence. It's something that we really can't put into words, but it has to be experienced. And where Jesus tells us in the Course that creation is love. Creation is love, and that's what we are. Love is what we are. So we're here to be extensions of the love of God in the world. And we can only do that if, again, we're aligning our mind with that right mind. And when we were talking before about the soul, it came to me, every seeming soul is all of God. We're not a branch cut off. So where you were talking about the sun and the sunbeam and the ocean and the wave, that the wave contains all of the ocean. It's never separate and apart from it in any way. It's not a branch cut off. Or the sunbeam that's coming from the sun is the same thing. It's an extension of that. It's not separate in itself. So we want to remember that within each seeming God is expressing as soul, everything. God is contained in every single aspect of the expression of God, which is soul. To me, that's my interpretation of that. And what else? We were talking about, yeah, that asking and the importance of that. We want to look, we want to wait, we want to make that space so that the interpretation from the higher mind can be made for us. And then choosing not to judge it is the true forgiveness of it. So we're constantly asking, as the ego speaks first, for spirit to reinterpret what we seemingly see. And the idea is to be open to seeing it differently. And that's the space that we're talking about. We want to be willing and open for a different interpretation of this seeming world that the insanity of this projection of fear and guilt that we made. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with what you said about the sun and the sunbeam. The beams, they're connected at the core. So we all have unconditional love in our soul, in our inner truth. However, when we are expressing that love, we have all the power of God within us. So we are never separate. You know, the Bible says, be still and know that I am God. Jesus Christ said on numerous occasions, my Father and I are one. Jesus is no different than any one of us. He is teaching us in A Course in Miracles to be like him. And if Jesus said while he was here on earth, my Father and I are one, that is true for each and every one of us. But in order to feel God's presence within us, in order to feel the truth of who we are, we need to still our minds and release any of those egoic distractions. You know, it's so funny. I was thinking today, you know, my whole life revolves around me like checking my phone for emails, for text messages, I'm working for different marketing companies right now, and their way of communicating with me for up and coming jobs is via email. So I'm constantly checking my phone. And today I was thinking, you know, I really am not ultra happy with being so dependent on my phone for everything. It's the way the world seems to work right now. I mean, when you look at anyone in a restaurant, at the gym, you know, they're always so engrossed in what's happening on their phone, but it's really not making me happy because it's a way of just distract. It's a distraction. I mean, I'm not fully present with the truth of I'm not fully present with God when I'm constantly on this phone all day. Now you need to be somewhat aware of what's going on in the phone. I mean, on your phone, just to be a part of the world, but to be like so connected to the phone, that has to be of the ego because it creates so much anxiety. You know, I was having a weekly training session at the gym yesterday. And my trainer, I noticed while I was in the midst of my sets, you know, whatever I was doing, the bicep curls or whatever, while I was in the midst of my sets, she was on her phone texting. And I was just really getting annoyed. Like, she's not present with me. She's on her phone texting, and this is not what I'm paying her to do. I'm paying her to focus on me, you know? And so then I went into another situation and I started venting about my irritation because I didn't know how to communicate to my trainer about it. And the person that I vented to shared a story about how he was in therapy, talking about a real intimate circumstance that he needed to talk about, and he noticed that his therapist was on his phone texting while he was telling the story, and he just walked out of the therapy session. But I think about that is because when we are so engrossed in our phone all the time, it's just so distracting. The only way we can be fully present with ourselves, fully present with the person that we're with, and fully present with God is just to still our minds. And we cannot still our minds when we are always focused on emails and text messages. So this is a lesson that I think I need to learn. I used to check my phone each night at the end of the night before I went to sleep. And then I found out that I was having a hard time sleeping because my mind was going again. So I really think it's important to be like fully present. Again, I'm not saying that we don't all need phones, because we do. But I also think it's God wants us to be fully present in whatever we are doing. That's what Course in Miracles students, teachers are learning how to be fully present in the moment. And then Myrna was talking about her purpose in this lifetime being forgiveness. And I really think that's like such a beautiful purpose. And I think in a way, I think we all have that as our purpose, because A Course in Miracles is very clear that the way home to heaven is through forgiveness. I think we're all born into this world with certain guilt from past lifetimes that we have not yet released. And the way to release the guilt from past lifetimes is through forgiveness. It's through forgiving our brother, and it's through forgiving ourselves. I mean, all forgiveness is really self-forgiveness. We don't forgive our brother for their sake, although they might benefit. We really forgive for our sake. I was listening to an analogy on some podcast. I can't remember who it was, but I know it was Course in Miracles, because that's all I listened to. And they were talking about this man carrying around a bag of stones, and he was just walking around carrying around this bag of stones. And then someone said to him, why do you carry around that heavy bag of stones? Why don't you put the bag of stones down? And the man said, well, I can't. I'm just so used to carrying the bag. I don't know how to release it. And then they compared the stones to grievances. They compared the stones to resentments. It's like when we have grievances, when we have resentments, when we have unforgiveness, people that we have not yet fully forgiven, it's like we're carrying around a load on our back, and life is heavy, life is cumbersome, life is difficult. But we have the choice at each and every moment. We can just let go of the bag. We can forgive our brother. We can embody the essence of innocence. That's an affirmation that I talk about a lot. I embody the essence of innocence. We don't have to carry around these grievances. We don't have to carry around these resentments. We can drop this bag of stones anytime we choose, because A Course in Miracles is telling us, we have free choice at each and every moment. Right, Myrna?
Yeah. Unforgiveness is a very, very heavy load to carry around, because it's full of guilt. When we're not forgiving, we're feeling guilty. And Karen put something in the chat. I like that. Forgiveness is the great need of this world because it is a world of illusions. So when we think that we're living in a world of illusions, what are we carrying around a whole bag of guilt for? Well, it's only an illusion anyway. It's not true. And that's why God forgives us for everything, because, on the level of, on the level of spirit, there is no illusion. It's only truth. So if there's only truth in the great world of God, of the holiness of who we are, there is no anger, there is no retribution. It's all, it's all beautiful. So again, that's why I think the Course weighs so heavily on the aspect of forgiveness. The Course is the entire Course, really, is based on that. And if we could just buy into that one lesson, we wouldn't need the entire Course. Like the Course in Miracles says, we can do it in an instant. It can be done in an instant, but we don't. We carry it around and carry it around. And maybe, like you say, the bag of stones, so we release one stone at a time, I mean, it's not, we don't get rid of the whole bag all at once. And so, it's just a matter of, of understanding that when we have an unforgiving thought, we have to just obliterate it. We have to get rid of it. It's over. Don't hang on to it, because then that only keeps us ensconced in the ego's world. And I think one of the purposes in our lifetime here, and maybe the entire purpose of our life, is to get rid of the ego, is to, and as you say, we carry a lot of guilt in from perhaps past lives, and maybe we're just here to bring it into this world and unload it. And that's why it's such a difficult world, really. Humanity, it's not easy to be human, because we suffer a lot, as well as the pleasures that we feel. It's not always lasting. So that's important. And another thing, when you talked about the cell phone, what I was reminded of yesterday, I was at the car wash, and they said, okay, it'll take 25 minutes. And I sat down with a bunch of other people, maybe 10 other people, that were waiting for their cars to be serviced. Anyway, I noticed that every one of the people was on their cell phone, everyone. And of course, I also, the first thing I'm going to do, you think I'm going to sit there for 20 minutes without a cell phone? It's not possible. That's what we become. We become almost robotic in that respect. And it's funny that you brought that up, because that really came into mind yesterday when I noticed everybody was tapping away. There wasn't one person that didn't have a cell phone that they weren't doing something with. Is there something wrong with that picture? You tell me. Anyway, Karen, you have your hand up. I'd like to see what you have to share.
Yeah, thank you both. I love this. I love what Susan started out with, of being fully present, and we cannot be fully present with a cell phone. No way. And I love that, because I notice that about myself too. I notice that about myself too. When I can put my cell phone down and be fully present, it's so much better, so much better, especially around grandkids and stuff like that. The other thing I wanted to share, now I hope I can get this story right. Have you ever heard the story about the two monks that were walking along the path? And one was a senior monk, and there was a senior monk and a junior monk. Okay, so it doesn't look like you've heard the story. I'm going to try to tell it as best I can. I'm never good at retelling jokes or stories, but so it goes along with what Susan was talking about with carrying the bag of stones, carrying a burden. So there was a senior monk and a junior monk, and one of their vows is that you're not to touch a woman or look at a woman. Even looking at a woman is considered, what is it called? I forget. Chastity something. You break your chastity something. I forget it, but you know what I mean. So
Jewish expression is treif, I think.
Is that it? Is that it?
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe that's, I know treif has to do with food. It's unholy, unless you're eating kosher food, it's treif, or maybe it's the same thing with an unholy person.
Exactly. They can't even look at a woman, let alone touch her. So they're walking down this path and they had to cross over this stream. And the stream was kind of deep and but they were okay with it. But there was this woman sitting there and she was sitting there and she was scared. She couldn't, cross the stream on her own. And obviously she needed help. And so the senior monk, being kind, picked her up and carried her across the stream. And carried her across the stream, put her down, and they kept walking. Well, the junior monk looked at him and couldn't believe it, but he didn't want to question him because he was a senior monk, but it kept stewing and stewing and stewing. So they're walking, and then time went by, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes went by, and he just said, he couldn't let it go. And he looked at the senior monk and he said, I can't believe you picked that woman up and carried her across the stream. You know, we're not supposed to touch women or even look at women. And he looked at him and he said, you're still carrying that woman? He said, that was 10 minutes ago. You're still carrying that? Like he looked at him like he was still carrying that burden. He was still carrying that burden. Why are you still carrying that? And he said, I did the most kind thing that I could do in the moment, and that was to carry her. And he said, I didn't even look at her, really. I just picked her up and carried her and did the best that I could do. That was the most loving, kind thing to do. But the junior monk carried it with him like it was eating him up. 10 minutes later, he brought up and he's like, are you still carrying? We do it all the time. If we think about it, we carry this stuff and it's like, why are you still holding on to that? It's over. The past is over. It can touch me not. Let it go. So that's such a good reminder, Susan Michelle. And that reminded me of that story. So I just wanted to share it. That's all.
Great story, Karen. I love that story. I made notes on that story. Glorian.
Yeah, that was great. I love that. And I think some of the time we don't even recognize that we're doing it. It's just unconscious. So that's why we want to work to bring everything to our conscious mind so that we can let it go. I like what you started out with, Susan, about, that oneness that we all share. And once we recognize that beyond all the seeming concepts that we see is the light of God. And it brings us to today's lesson. And I mentioned before I do the lessons in the morning with a small group of women. And of course, today I didn't have a lot of time, but today's lesson, I will there be light, and there is no will but God's. So that's the review lesson. And it came to me, we move into the light of true understanding of that which I am, remembering and recognizing this I, my divinity as Christ, is God's will. God's will for me is perfect happiness, and I can only be perfectly happy in the light of his love. So again, it's coming down to, like Myrna was talking about the inner peace. And, the goal is to accept the inner peace. And we can only have inner peace when we accept ourselves as we were created and as what we truly are in truth, which is the love of God. And I love the story you told about the phone. And I was sitting here laughing because, we're judging it and saying, oh my goodness, like the person's not listening to us. And, I'll always say, and which is interesting because I felt guided that, if we're asking what we want, it's important to do that. So I'll always say, if someone's doing that, I'll wait for you to finish that. And then it reminds them that they are, they're not listening to you. But you really do have to laugh, and because it always has meaning for us. And I love what you shared about that, because it really does come back to us not being present with the presence of what we are. That's really what it is. So everything is showing us what we think when we're willing to ask and to see it differently. And I also like what you said about the unresolved guilt and what we're seeing projected out here again. That's our own stuff that's repeatedly projected out there. So if we can recognize that and be willing to let this stuff go, like the story Karen told, it'll be less and less because we carry everything's in our consciousness, so we carry it with us. So if we recognize that what I'm seeing is a projection of my own unresolved guilt and fear out there on the world, if I don't work to relinquish that judgment and move into that forgiveness of it, I'm going to continue to see it. So that's how we use this life in order to clear this stuff out and, and to let go of this ego thinking so that we don't manifest it again. Because until we do forgive it, it will repeat itself. And I think what it's always asking us to do is to recognize its meaninglessness, because it's only meaningful to the ego. So if we're in that reality of being, we recognize it has absolutely no meaning to us whatsoever, or never any effect on our reality. So I always say that we can sum up the course really with that prayer. The first sentence: forgive us our illusions, Father, and help us to accept our true relationship with you, because that's really what we're here to do. Recognize our illusions, forgive, be willing not to judge them, and in not judging them, we're accepting our true relationship with the Father as we were created. So, yeah. And then you said something else, and I mentioned it before, but it's been coming to me to use. We use the ego to get out of the ego. So if I'll say to myself, am I going to use this to keep me in hell, to keep me bound? And I've been reminding myself that, because you're recognizing you're in the ego, am I going to keep doing this? Because it only binds me in hell. And then you recognize your responsibility, and and then the willingness to turn that over. But it's very important, that we recognize it's all illusion, and our escape from this dream of fear and death. Jesus says, I can escape from the world I see by giving up attack thoughts. Attack thoughts are any thoughts that are projecting judgment, good, right, good, bad, right, wrong. Any form of duality is the projection of guilt that's keeping us in hell. We're attached to being right, being wrong, all of that ego analysis, which really does have to go. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You said a lot of great things. Everyone did. Um, our insecurities was one thing you said, keep replaying themselves out until we learn the lesson that they are there to teach us. And I think that's such an important point to remember, because a lot of times we find ourselves in a certain energetic pattern where we have a certain type of exchange with someone, and it happens with one person, and then we don't forgive that person, so it ends up happening with another person. And when we don't learn the lesson is always love. The lesson is always forgiveness. So when we're not able to forgive a particular trigger, it's like we have an open wound, and we keep attracting this same type of dysfunctional pattern into our life, because the universe is giving us another opportunity to heal. It's just so important to remember that. And I wrote about that in my book. It's like when we find ourselves replaying the same patterns in our life, it's because we have not learned to forgive. But the lesson is always forgiveness. And about judgment, I mean, so many times our mind will judge people, and we cannot judge and love at the same time. I even think about that when it comes to my trainer, who was on her cell phone while I was doing my sets. On one hand, that was an irritation for me that she wasn't focused on me. But then I guess on the other hand, if that's a trigger, maybe there's something in me that she's reflecting back to me. If I'm seeing her as not being fully present, maybe that's something in me that I need to work on as well. I just thought of that. right now as I'm speaking, because when I see it outside myself, it's reflecting back to me something that is within that has not yet been healed. So, and it's about being fully present in the moment with myself, with God, with my brother is so very important, because the only time we can feel God truly is right here, right now. I remember growing up, I've learned a lot of soul lessons with my sister, and I'm still in the process of learning a lot of soul lessons with my sister. I remember throughout our younger years, she would tell me that I was not fully present with her. She would talk to me, and she could tell that I wasn't really listening. And I thought about that. And I think after she conveyed that to me, I made more of an effort to be fully present with whomever I was with. I remember there's a great analogy towards that principle when I was studying acting, years ago. I remember hearing the acting instructor say, if you're just listening to the person that you're reciting lines with, if you're just waiting for your cue as to when your lines are supposed to be delivered, you're not fully present with the other person when they're delivering their lines, and the audience can sense that, and they're not going to be drawn to your scene, because you think of it as an acting class. You have lines to memorize. So after my partner finishes a certain line, then it's my turn to say a line. And so many times as a new actor, you don't want to screw up your lines, so you just keep you don't really listen to what the other person is saying. You just wait for it to be your turn to speak. And then when it's your turn to speak, you want to make sure to deliver the right lines, but then you take that out of the acting world and you take that into life. Like, how many times when we're talking to someone are we not really listening to what they're saying? We're just thinking about what we're going to say next. So I think to be fully present with another person is it's loving. I mean, I guess that's what it is. It's loving. And that's how we establish true intimacy with other people, is by loving them. So it's not just by saying the right thing. It's by truly being present and doing our best to understand what the other person is saying. Karen.
I love that, Susan Michelle. And that reminds me of Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle, Be Here Now. He shares a lot about that in that book. And he talks about the spacious, aware presence. And I love what he says, which this is like a practice for me. It's like, be there as the presence, not a person. So it's exactly what you said. Like, when you're listening to someone, just be there as that aware space that's listening. You're not like, oh my God, what am I going to say? Judging, evaluating, wondering what am I going to say next? And, thinking about what you're going to respond with. That is totally not being in the present moment. And that's what the ego does. That's what the ego does. So it's just being that space. And, that's like the greatest gift we can give. It's just listening. And there's another, I think it's kindness. In the kindness quote I read a long time ago, something about listening is the greatest form of kindness. Listening, just listening. Sometimes we don't even have to say anything. We don't even have to respond. Just listening to someone, just being that space, I think is so important, because we don't really know what someone's going through. We can't really say we know. And that's something I've learned too through experience, not to say, oh, I know what you mean, because I don't know. I really don't. So just being that space is so important. I'm so glad you said that, because I need to keep learning that too. So thanks.
Myrna?
Yeah, I wanted to say that brought to mind is even an animal knows when you're not present. My little dog taught me that, every time I go on the computer, if I be on the computer a long time, he would just start driving me crazy, bark, bark, barking, barking, bark. He knew that I was not present. And then I'd have to get off the computer. And even if I was just sitting on the couch doing nothing, he didn't mind that. But if I'd be on the computer, it really upset him a lot. So that might, indicate that even animals know when we're not fully present with them. So it's something that you can sense, like you said, Susan. The audience sensed when an actor is not really sharing or present with the audience. They sense that, and it makes a difference. So I just wanted to add that it's very important to be present.
Glorian?
Yeah, I really love this. And, when you were saying there, Susan, about, true intimacy with someone is established by loving them. So if we're in the ego, we're not loving them. We're thinking, judging, analyzing, evaluating. So the idea is to bring ourselves into that presence of the Christ mind and not be just hearing what's being said, but truly listening with an open mind. And like Karen said, we don't have to really say anything if we're not led to. That's that if we're in listening with that Christ mind and we're asking, whatever we say will be absolutely perfect. So I think it's important to recognize that we can't be loving someone if we're in the ego. The only true love is the impersonal love of God, and we only receive that if we're moving to the presence of the Christ mind. Thanks.
Yeah, and now thank you, Myrna, thank you, Glorian, thank you, Karen. I love this time together. It is 2:00, and as A Course in Miracles says, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. The only thing that's real is the love. I love you all. I love our time here, and I will now return the microphone to Lynn.
Wow, that was quick. So wonderful, you guys. Every one of you. So grateful for you being here. So thank you, Susan, and thank you, Myrna. And we will see you on Monday.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.